is the news, as I was saying earlier, that really my mouth dropped open last night when I saw this. Dan Poulter, who is my local MP in central Suffolk and North Ipswich, 23,000 majority, defecting to the Labour Party. Now, you have to think very carefully about this. He says he could no longer look his NHS colleagues and patients in the eye and stay on as a Conservative. He works part-time as a psychiatrist, and he says the Conservatives were no longer focused on public services. Here's the bit I don't get at all. He's staying on until the general election, but he's then standing down. So what is the point of defecting to Labour if we've got a general election in a matter of months? That makes no sense to me at all, unless there is something more going on behind the scenes. And I'm delighted to welcome Kevin Schofield, political editor at the Huffington Post UK. Good morning to you, Kevin.
Morning, David.
What do you make of this?
I mean, yeah, like yourself, my jaw dropped open last night when I saw this story drop around about 5 o'clock. Yeah, I mean, it's another huge blow, obviously, for Rishi Sunak. It's not a great look when you lose an MP, especially not when they defect to your biggest rivals, with our local elections just coming up in a few days' time and a general election later in the year. Ironically, it comes at the end of what's been a pretty good week, actually, for Rishi Sunak. It's all relative, of course. He doesn't have very many good weeks, but you know, he did have quite a successful week with his Rwanda bill passing, announcing a big boost in defence spending. So he was feeling pretty pleased with himself, I think. But last night, the announcement from Dan Poulter would have knocked the wind from his sails. Well,
quite. My very nice neighbour, Anne Wright, good morning to you, Anne, if you're watching this morning. Anne Wright messaged me and she sent me an email that came from Dan Poulter, which was rather thrilling. So he goes on in this and he says, I want to write to you. This is to the association themselves. And he says, you know, I work on the front line, this great strain. I'm struggling to look my NHS colleagues, my patients in the eye. I've come to the conclusion that only the Labour Party has the trust and the will to restore and revitalise our health service. Well, as you can imagine, that's gone down like a bowl of cold soup. And many of those in the association, Sam Murray, a Suffolk County Councillor, has posted, good riddance. So glad I no longer have to apologise for his failure to turn up in North Ipswich. They are livid.
Absolutely, and you can absolutely understand it, can't you? I mean, this will be someone who they have campaigned alongside, who they have worked to get elected to Parliament, obviously with a very healthy 23,000 majority, and then he turns around and jumps ship to the Labour Party. So you can absolutely understand why grassroots Conservatives in that constituency, who will know Dan Poulter personally and will have been given no warning really that this was coming, you can understand why their noses have been put out of joint. It's completely understandable, but you know, it's just another blow for Rishi Sunak, a blow for the party. And as I say, with these local elections coming up, it's the last type of publicity that the Prime Minister was needing.
Well, so we're now at 66 standing down, which means that actually they need, if there's a no confidence vote, and we'll talk about that in a minute, they need 15%, which makes it, what, 51 or thereabouts. Just in terms of that, I just don't understand why he's done this, because if he was standing down, surely he would just carry on until the election and say, I'm standing down. As you say, it's all those people who deliver leaflets, knock on doors. They're the ones who get you elected, not you. And also, his mother used to be my agent when I was a Conservative candidate. I know Dan very well. Is there anything more to this that we know about?
I don't think so. I mean, I think if he was, you know, I haven't heard any rumours, let's just say, that he's been lined up for a seat elsewhere. I think at the moment we just have to take it at face value. It's obviously been done to inflict maximum damage on the Conservative Party, on Rishi Sunak as well. We know that the NHS is either first or second in voters' list of priorities. So this is a massive coup, really, for the Labour Party. And you can imagine last night, Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, were both, you know, putting out tweets saying how great it was and welcome aboard Dan Poulter. So yeah, they're making hay with this one, and it'd be interesting to see how Rishi Sunak responds.
Oh, absolutely, of course. Keir Starmer rubbing his hands with glee about the whole thing. Now, this is now fascinating because, as you say, Rishi Sunak had a very good week, actually, a relatively good week, and thought he's in a really good place, I think, as he goes towards the general election. But this is the front page of the Telegraph this morning. Conservative rebels are working on a 100-day roadmap to turn around the party's fortunes. So we've got the local elections on Thursday, we've got the mayoral elections on Thursdays. I think most people believe it will be a terrible day for the Conservative Party. Now, just in terms of what's happening here, there's a strategy which is inspired by Newt Gingrich. This is the contract with America, which revived Republican fortunes in 1994. Essentially, what they want to do is a series of quick wins. But the much bigger issue here is that actually they are coalescing, it seems, around Penny Mordaunt, and they want Sunak out.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot will hinge on the mayoralty elections in Tees Valley, that's Ben Houchin, and in the West Midlands, that's Andy Street. Those are two big high-profile Conservative mayors who have really been flying the flag for the party in those parts of the country. Now, if they were to lose, as well as the predictions are that the party are going to lose something like 400, 500 councillors on Thursday night, then that really would be very damaging for Rishi Sunak indeed. I think were those two individuals to hang on, and I'm led to believe that both of those elections are on a knife edge, if they were to hang on, then I think Rishi Sunak could point to those examples as saying, look, all is not lost. We can still win in non-traditional parts of the country, so stick with me. If it's a complete wipeout, if they went, all those councillors went, then I think all bets are off. I think you could very quickly see Conservative MPs go into a bit of a tailspin, and that is when that plot that you just mentioned may well come into effect. I think, though, on balance, the judgment that they've got to make is whether or not voters would stand for yet another Prime Minister since the last general election. I think they might think that the Conservatives have completely lost their minds.
Or you could argue that actually their fortunes are so bad, they've got nothing to lose, so they basically spin the wheel one more time.
Absolutely, and I've spoken to Conservative MPs who really do think that. They think that clearly the opinion polls have not shifted. All the evidence suggests that the party is heading for disaster at the general election. So why not get rid of Sunak and just try with another leader? Penny Mordaunt, you're right, is the one who both moderate and those on the right of the party seem to be coalescing around as a sort of unity candidate. But then you've got to ask yourself, would Penny Mordaunt really want to become leader at this particular stage and lead the party into what looks like an inevitable defeat? I think she would much rather wait until after the election, assuming, of course, she gets re-elected herself. She's got a very small majority in Portsmouth. Then make another bid for the leadership. So, yeah, there's a lot of different moving parts at play. Also, remember, there's actually a by-election on Thursday as well in Blackpool South.
Of course,
again,
yes.
Conservatives are expected to lose that as well, but it will be interesting to see the size of the swing to Labour, because that will give an indication.
Well, and of course the majority there, 3,600 in Blackpool South, so that's a tiny majority.
It is, yeah. I mean, no one is giving the Conservatives an earthly. I think it would be a symbolic result, really, when the key thing to look at is the size of the swing to Labour, because then you'll have an indication as to how many seats Labour could look to win in the Red Wall. All those seats that Boris Johnson obviously won back in 2019, there's a fair chance, I think, that they'll all return to Labour come the next general election.
I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. Penny Mordaunt has distanced herself, as you would expect, with sources close to the Cabinet Minister saying it is codswallop. Let's move on, shall we, and talk about Scotland. You and I spoke, I think, on Friday about Hamza Yousaf and the problems that he faces this coming week. Now, apparently, the story has moved on since Friday because Hamza Yousaf has now written humiliating begging letters to opposition leaders in a bid to avoid being ousted as First Minister. This is an article in the Daily Mail, actually, saying the lame duck SNP leader has asked the parties to meet him this week to find common ground. So, as we know, there are two votes of no confidence, one in him and one in the government altogether, which are proposed. And he essentially wrote these letters to the leaders of the Conservatives, Labour, the Greens, Lib Dems, also Alex Salmond's Alba Party. You couldn't make this up. It's priceless that he is relying on Ash Regan. And, of course, the numbers are so tight, 64 versus 63. Ash Regan, when she defected, he said she is no great loss. He's coming to regret those words, isn't he?
He absolutely is, yeah. He's having to eat an enormous slice of humble pie if he wants to save his political skin. What's obviously really ironic about this, as well as it hands a lot of power once again to Alex Salmond. Remember him? You know, he is the leader of Alaba, and you know he is. I see an interview with him in the Sunday Times this morning in which he basically names his price. He wants an electoral pact between his party and the SNP, a pro-independence pact, which could even see SNP candidates standing down at the next Holyrood elections to give Alex Salmond's party a clear run at it. Now that would be completely unacceptable to a lot of SNP members and MSPs and MPs who have absolutely no time for Alex Salmond anymore. He is a very divisive and controversial figure. So yeah, it is absolutely remarkable the way this has fallen. Now, if obviously Humza Yousaf chooses not to jump into bed with Alex Salmond and Ash Regan, then he could well be out of a job this time next week. It's a pretty remarkable state of affairs. It
really is. And actually, I saw the interview. He was doorstep really yesterday, and the way he tried to spin this was like, if the Greens don't, if Ash Regan doesn't come on board, it would be very disappointing. It's not the right decision. And I was thinking, it's not really anything to do with you, Humza Yousaf. It's all in Ash Regan's power.
Absolutely. She holds all the cards here. She can effectively name her price, and it's just a question of whether Humza Yousaf is willing to pay that price. What price does he want to put on his own political survival? Now, he's had a pretty torrid year since he took over from Nicola Sturgeon 12 months ago. It's not getting any better. The way he handled the dumping of the Greens last week from the Scottish Government coalition was really cack-handed. He really annoyed them. He pretty much humiliated them, and they're obviously exacting their revenge now by saying they'll vote against him in this vote of no confidence on Wednesday.
There is. Will he survive?
I think it's starting to look pretty unlikely. Even if he were to survive the vote, he's still got another 2 years to get through somehow holding together his government in the Scottish Parliament. So I think even if he doesn't go this week, I think time is definitely running out for Humza Yousaf.